Here we go. My name is Tobias Schimmer. I'm the CEO of FileWave, and I'm very excited to, welcome you to our Q4 Alliance, the last one this year. So this time we timed it to be just before Thanksgiving in the US next week, a big holiday week. So I'm glad I'm still seeing so many folks joining us from over there. And depending on where you are, I know it's still early. Looking through the list, I have seen people from Switzerland, from Germany, from the Nordics, from the UK, and also a lot of folks from the US. So great to see such an international, I guess, gathering here. And yeah, excited to welcome you all. So I think with that, let's jump a little bit into my intro. I want to talk to you a bit about our business vision, right? So I think I've talked about that before. I think to me, it's super important that we as a company keep repeating to you, our valued customers, what we're thriving to be. And I think here it is. I'm going to read it out for you. We want to become, or continuously invest into being a leader in the endpoint operations, enabling small and medium-sized businesses as well as schools to be 100% efficient in managing, customizing, and scaling their endpoints via a single interface. And we'll talk a bit more about, what exactly we mean by that. And I think hopefully many of you, can subscribe to that we're already pretty good at a lot of these things. And I will also, I'll talk a bit on the next 2-3 slides about where we want to invest there and how we want to become better. So Josh, next slide, please. So what does it mean, right? I think today we are cross-platform. I think we are a highly customizable tool. And, I think whenever I get the chance to look at one of your environments and how you've set up FileWave, I think it becomes clear again and again that our tool is super customizable through scripting, through custom fields, and through the file sets. You can really build around the important use cases, right, that you have in your organization. We're easily scalable, I think, for any complexity and scenarios. This the customization that we offer makes us super flexible and scalable for you. When you start small, when your organization becomes bigger, or when you expand the use of FileWave to other parts of your organization. And we're actually seeing this in you and our customer base day in and day out. We're highly flexible in how you run us. You can run FileWave in the cloud. You can run it on-prem. We have our very powerful native app that we'll call Central. And Tony will talk a bit about naming today. We have our web version, which we'll call FileWave, or which we're calling now FileWave Anywhere, because we think it can really be the tool that, people that are out in the field that need to do service on endpoints can really do it from anywhere, accessing FileWave through the browser. We can deploy content to all operating systems. And I think at the same time, right, I think we're doing a lot here. I think I want to keep reminding people, FileWave, we're still a fairly small organization that I think is pretty agile, and through that, able to offer bespoke support and solutions to you, through our support team, through our professional services team. I think we're really able to address your specific needs. And I think, how do we do that? A big part of that is also the experts that are going to speak to you today. So, we have people that are really good experts in implementing endpoint operations as a sparring partner for you to really set up your environment in the best way possible, right? So that you can concentrate on the main things that make you successful in your job and in your organizations, while leveraging the capabilities of FileWave at its best. Next slide, please. So that brings me to our product goals, right? I think they're basically, in line with what I just talked about, but we really want to double down on expanding and investing in our cross-platform capabilities via that one single pane of glass. We want that to stay somewhat lean, but highly scalable, as I said, right? So that when you're a medium-sized organization and you get started with FileWave, you can do that. But then while you grow and while your organization grows, you can actually continuously grow within FileWave. We want to work on simplifying some things, especially, you know, the workflows on how you do things within FileWave. But we definitely want to keep the high degree of customization, ability to customize things to your needs. We'll continuously invest into supporting the security and the integration functionalities. I think, especially for our business customers, you know, in the discussions with some larger enterprises that we have recently been able to win as our customers, this is definitely a very important topic. I know it's also becoming more and more important in the education sector, and we're definitely heavily investing into the capabilities there. We'll continue to develop our cloud and on-prem offering. We think, you know, there's definitely a space for both of this, and we will continue to support basically the deployment through both of these setups. This is not so relevant maybe for you as our existing customers. I'm not sure if there's any prospects in the room, but we definitely want to invest and are investing, planning to invest in the very near future to make our setup and onboarding when you're a new customer easier. And then lastly, and this really links back to also a lot of the feedback that we've gotten from you in our most recent NPS survey in September, that we really want to streamline the guides, right, and simplify some of the guides that we have in the knowledge base. I think there's quite a bit of content there, and Tony and Josh and some others are working really hard to update that, to structure it better so it's easier to find, and so on and so forth. Again, back to the point, right, to enable you to easily find the information that is relevant to you to really set up your environment in the best way possible. All right, so today's agenda. I think, you know, before I get there, as you see, I think we're continuously honing in on really finding out what is really strong about FileWave, and I think, you know, hopefully you can see yourself within that. And yeah, and I think the product goals and the things that we want to invest on really align with that. So today, pretty exciting agenda. We'll, again, you know, we'll keep it around 2 hours. We'll talk about our 14.9 and 14.9.1 release. Tony and Josh will talk about the roadmap and product board. We'll also reflect a bit on the 2022 milestones and things we've been able to launch and do together with you. And then obviously, I think you're probably also very interested in that, is we're talking about what we're currently working on very concretely and our plans for 2023. And then we will close with our, I think, most favorite part of the agenda, where we do the Ask FileWave Anything. Yeah, and then close the day and, you know, let you guys off towards Thanksgiving and the end of the year. So with that, over to you, Tony.
Well, no pressure there. You say things like it's going to be exciting. Now I've actually got to be exciting. Good morning, everyone. So glad you're able to join us. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Tony Keller, and I'm the VP of Product here at FileWave. Josh Levitsky will be presenting a lot today too, who's head of our professional services organization and training. So I suspect most of you got an email yesterday about version 14.9 releasing. So that came out yesterday. You may say, why is it 14.9.1? Well, because we found an issue early on in our early adopters program. So we updated the version so that those folks could all upgrade as well. For those of you who have not upgraded yet from 14.7.x. There are a couple things to be aware of. If you're already at 14.8, these aren't pertinent, but you may find that you've got a little bit longer upgrade time than normal. So just be prepared for that. There's just some database conversion that's going on, particularly some numbers being converted that take a long time on database upgrade. The larger the environment, the longer it will take. So if you're going from 14.7x to 14.9.1, prepare for that. There are some new ports that need opened. So there's a KB article that, sorry, I was just reading the chat there. There's a KB article that points out what those ports are. And this has to do with what we'll talk about a little bit later, some of the refactoring work that we've got going on in the product to kind of modernize some certain pieces of the technology stack that are underneath FileWave. And one of those was a move to NATS away from ZMQ. Last note, if you're coming from 14.7.2 to 14.9, is that Observe Client is fully removed and replaced entirely with TeamViewer. Last note, I want to make kind of a special note on 14.9. We really did a lot of focus on a backlog of bugs and defects in this particular release. So the teams spent some extra time to go through older things that had not been able to be touched, and it's more than 150 different bugs and defects addressed. So the really kind of trying to commit to the quality of the platform and trying to spend as much time there as we can to drive down any kind of issues that you all see in the field.
I was just going to add about the long upgrade. I had a customer that I work with who last night did the upgrade from 14.7.2 to 14.9. Whether you go to 14.8 or 14.9 from a previous version, it's going to go through that conversion one time. Took 7 hours. So be patient. If you have a large environment, it's not broken. It's just going through the upgrade process. Just be patient with it.
There's a couple of new kind of noteworthy additions in 14.9. The first is both a security and feature related update is bringing Grafana up. We were a couple of versions behind, a couple of major versions behind on Grafana. For those of you who have not used Grafana, there's not an area of the product that I find more interesting from a I'm managing my manager perspective. You know, it's not really for your customers, but for your managers, if you want to start presenting some good data and making yourself look like a rock star, start taking a look at the web dashboard that's built on Grafana. So version 9.1.3 is included in 14.9. It's got some new visualizations in it. And as I said, there were some security updates in it as well. So that's embedded now in the web admin, right? And that's the next topic on here is we've added, for those of you who joined the webinars that we did over the summer, and boy, summer feels like a long way away right now, I got to tell you, it feels like a long time ago. But we did several webinars over the summer on the associations to deployment conversion tool. That's now released in the web admin, and which, as Tobias mentioned before, we're now calling FileWave Anywhere. We wanted to actually give names to these two things instead of saying, hey, the FileWave web admin, the web admin, the web admin. So we're calling it FileWave Anywhere, and as Tobias mentioned, the reasons for that are a couple, but mainly that you can use it from anywhere, right? You're not tied down to a desktop device. So we're very interested and excited to see how this grows a little bit. And we're going to talk about kind of some of the segues into the native product, which we also are going to talk about naming for here in a second. So we're going to talk about that a little bit later. And then 14.9 also has the, air quotes, formal support for Ventura and iPad OS 16.1. So the fields are all updated. The profiles for configuration profiles, DEP profiles are all updated, etc. In this release. Other notes, if you are using Grafana and using YML files, it's probably not 99.9% of you don't do this, but if you do this, there's a small issue with it. We didn't want to hold up the release related to it. It's a very, very simple fix, but because so few people would be impacted with it, we went ahead with the release. If you have these though, you just open a support ticket, we'll take care of you, toot sweet, and that'll be fixed in a future version. There's a knowledge base note on that in known issues, a very small issue. We are also announcing 3 deprecations in the product. These are, deprecation doesn't mean it's gone now, but it means it will be gone in future. The first is our discovery agent that's on our boosters. We're doing away with that. It was a very unpopular feature. Almost no one used it. And any off-the-shelf network scanning tool is is just as good as this, in fact, better, because it's not limited with some of the limitations that run our boosters. So we're announcing the deprecation of that. We're also announcing the deprecation of the old style of Android management, which was through Android delivering APKs. So that's gone. Well, not gone yet, but will be. And the last is ZMQ. That one you won't notice much because it's not something that you directly use, but ZMQ was the notification engine. So let's say, for instance, you're using the FileWave admin, another administrator somewhere makes a change, that change gets propagated to the server. This ZMQ tool is the thing that actually notifies your admin that there was a change and makes those changes show in all the admins. So we're moving away from ZMQ. The reason I mentioned that one in particular is that you'll want to make sure that your clients are updated, because as we go forward and ZMQ is removed, if your clients are not up to date, then the notification parts of the client will start to break on older versions. So you want to make sure and keep those up to date. I'd also like to mention a small change for those of you who manage Android devices. There's a capability to do a global policy, which is basically setting rules for devices. Immediately upon enrollment, they'll get these rules. There were a couple of things that were included in the global policy that created a problem for BYOD devices. So those elements have been removed from the global policy. So if you use them, one was the password, I can't remember the other off the top of my head. But if you use those, you'll want to put those in a regular configuration policy or profile to assign devices. So you can still use them, just not as a part of the global policy. And then the last thing, and then probably the most welcome on this whole slide, is we really do listen to you. When you give us feedback about things, whether it's our direction, so Tobias mentioned NPS scores earlier, when you give us feedback there, when you give us feedback through product board, we listen to that. So we had announced deprecation of editing profiles in our native application, our native admin, and moving that to the web full steam. And the overwhelming feedback was, we don't want that. We'd really like to continue to be able to use the native admin. And so we've adjusted our path on that. And we're no longer committed to moving everything over. We're going to let that web FileWave Anywhere tool kind of grow a little bit more organically as we go forward. So functionality in both places, but we've removed that deprecation. So you're not going to be hit with that warning anymore about editing profiles in your FileWave admin. Okay, so we mentioned deployments there in the previous slide, the associations to deployments. Now, those of you who are at our last Alliance meeting may say, hey, this looks a lot like the slide from last time, and it is. And the items that are in here we're not going to talk about. But all these things that we talked about in the webinars were about moving to deployments. And we are still moving to deployments. That deployment conversion tool is in this version of FileWave Anywhere. And we just wanted to give some best practice about what to do with it right now. Do you move to deployments now? Do you move everything from associations to deployments? And you can think of association or deployments as kind of grouped associations, or maybe even if in your mind, think of them as associations 2.0. They're the eventual total replacement for associations. And we're working on that process now, but deployments are going to be in both solutions, both in our native admin tool and in FileWave Anywhere. Right now, they're only in FileWave Anywhere. So do you want to move to them entirely right now? No, but would you like to play with the conversion, maybe create a couple of deployments, see how they work? That would be a great thing to do, right? So you can certainly work with our team on that. Okay, so what are we working on next? We just talked about what we've done in this last release. So what are the things that we're working on as we're moving forward, and in fact, working on right now? So for those of you, I think I've mentioned before, but we work in development cycles called program increments. We've just started a new program increment. This version of FileWave will be 14.10. 14.10. Now that may sound a little weird. You say, why isn't it 15? Well, full disclosure, we really feel like it's going to be a very major thing when deployments are in our native admin console. And when we have alignment on those two things, where deployments are available both in the web and native, that's going to be version 15 for us, right? We don't expect that to be this next version. So the next version is going to be 14.10. And the things that we're working on is we're continuing to invest in back-end refactoring of the product to make it more stable and more performant. That's really important to us, but it's one of those things like the duck paddling below the surface of the water that you don't necessarily see, right? So this move, for instance, from ZMQ to NATS, ticks a big check mark on this particular line of work, right? Other things that we're working on is updating our model update engine so that it's a common code base, et cetera. So there's a lot of stuff going on that front. As I mentioned, we're working on getting deployments in the native admin console. And again, we're going to talk about naming there in a second. I keep referring to it as native admin console. We're going to start referring to it as something different soon. And what we're doing in this next version is working on making those deployments available in the native admin in a read-only view as the first step, so you can see them. And then our next step, of course, will be that you can use them. So we're working on that. We're continuing to work on making the Windows imaging solution, our IBS, available for those of you who are in the cloud. So that's still in progress. Unlikely that will be 100% finished in this next version, but we continue to work on that. And then this next piece is really important to understand what we're doing with the web admin or FileWave Anywhere, as you've heard us refer to it, is that we feel that it's in a really good spot for what we refer to as a field technician persona. That's somebody that does 90% of the stuff that's in FileWave. So you're editing custom fields, creating groups, creating smart groups, doing associations, or in this case, deployments, building reports, etc. All of that's available in FileWave Anywhere today, as well as simple content creation. So for instance, an MSI type installer or a PKG type installer you can do in the web admin today. And that's really our target, to make this solution 100% usable for that person that's not the primary person in the environment that's building content. But even for those of you who are the primary person building content, it's still very much a tool of convenience when you're out and about that you can do stuff. And I will tell you, coincidentally, just a few weeks ago, we had an issue with TeamViewer where a service went down, and our IT team was working on it, and they resolved the issue, and they reached out to me and they're like, "Tony, can you test it?" Well, I was at my pond a mile away from my house, and I didn't want to go back to my house to test this, so I even whipped out my phone and was able to use the FileWave Anywhere to get in and confirm that the issue was actually solved. So it's a tool of convenience for the main FileWave admins, and for somebody that's in that field technician role, we think, you're carrying an iPad around, you're running around all day long, you're going to find it to be pretty darn useful. So we're going to look forward to starting to get feedback on that utilization and continue to let that kind of build organically. But as I said before, we're not going to force this. We're going to let it start to build based on momentum coming from your requests. Because we did hear loud and clear, you said, "Hey, we like the idea of web, but can we not only do web? Can we do some things in the native product as well?" So, and that brings me to our next point here, is that we're trying to also include some impactful enhancements that will really help for day-to-day management. Now, I'm not talking about major features here, but I'm talking about smaller things that will really make it. So a couple of things that we're working on now, probably two of these, probably the first two will be in the next release. We're working on them now. We have to see, part of it's, we have to balance the effort to get something done and of course wanting to release in a manner. But the first of these is looking to embed images into wallpaper images. So this is being able to do things like putting a serial number in a wallpaper image so that it will be dynamic on every iPad, because all ever managed iPads, especially me with my old eyes, I cannot flip over an iPad and read a serial number because it's just too dang small. So being able to do that with, say, device name or serial number or username, those types of things, embed those dynamically onto iPad wallpaper. So we're really looking forward to that one. We're also looking at an enhancement. We've got a lot of enhancements requests around reboot behavior. And one of those requests is, let's have a real type of faucet. So for those of you who do it today, you'll know that you can create a Mac or Windows file set that prompts the user for a reboot. But any of us who have managed things in an operational environment, and I've had this issue for a long time, is that, yeah, a user's going to take that dialogue with the OK, they're going to click on it, they drag it off to the side, and they ignore it, right? So this is an opt in a payload to set something as a really reboot, meaning that the user will get a prompt, but whether they click OK or not, the device really will reboot. And the use case for this is for things like a 0-day type of issue, or something where you've really got to get something out really, really fast. So not nearly as user-friendly to the user. It will force a reboot. You risk data loss with that, of course, so you do it judiciously, but lots of folks have asked for this, so that's one that we're working on as well. Last thing I'll mention in this cycle is we're looking at being able to start collecting Windows services information, i.e. the list of services on the Windows devices, whether they're running, the name, whether it's running, etc. And that would probably be a precursor to at some point being able to actually manage them and send kind of a restart service command or those types of things. All right. And for those of you who don't believe us that we're working on the deployments thing in native, I just wanted to give you a little screenshot now. Well, I should say, this is just an image, but it's an image of an actual admin. It's not just an image of the native admin here, showing deployments here above associations and mirroring, of course, what you see in FileWave Anywhere. Thank you, Josh, for that. All right. So what are we looking at later than that, right? So that I just talked about our current release, what came out yesterday, and I talked about what we're working on today. And that today is probably sometime in mid to late January would be our expected release date for that next version. So what are we thinking about after that? I can say that when we're looking longer term, we're looking at kind of some bigger endeavors. And the thing that's really boiled to the top for us based on feedback from all of you has been a facelift for our native admin. And internally, at least, we've been referring to that native admin as FileWave Central. Now, I'd like to kick this out to you a little bit, so please chime in the chat here. But we're looking for a name. We'd love to get some feedback on a name for that name. Looking for something that's location based, because the FileWave Anywhere, we kind of think of it, hey, you're using it anywhere, but the FileWave, the main admin, the native admin, we're thinking about something like Central, at the core of the business, or something like HQ, something like that. Please feel free to chime in here with names. And it's one of those situations where if you don't say something, then the other person's going to say something, and then we're going to end up with the name the other person picked that you won't be happy with. So the more feedback you can give us on that, the better. So feel free to chime in there with ideas. The second thing that we're looking at, which is we don't have a whole lot of features in the product or education specific, but one of the things that we're looking at is expanding our support for Chromebooks as well, meaning adding additional functionality. We have limited functionality, essential, but limited functionality on Chromebooks today. We'd really like to expand that. We think there's real capacity, or well, capacity is the wrong word. There's real need to do that. Capacity is a totally different question. There's not excess capacity, but we'll figure out that problem. We're kind of looking for a working group on this topic. And that doesn't mean that you have to be using our solution today for managing Chromebooks. In fact, if you're not, we would love to, I love that Starfleet, that's great. We'd love to have some feedback from those who even don't manage Chromebooks through FileWave currently, because your feedback about why you don't would be very valuable to us. So what we're looking to do is cross-reference the APIs from Chrome, from Google, to see what we can do against the list of things that you'd like us to do, against the list, of course, because we are a business, right? We're in the business of making a profit. We need to have some things that are actually then profitable for us. So we're looking to match those three things all at the same time to come up with a plan to do something more on the Chromebook side. So there's that. Some other things that we're thinking about that are kind of on the list. Third-party patching continues to be a thing that we'd like to maybe enhance. We do a fair bit with third-party patching today, but we'd maybe like to do some more with it. Some enhancements to the way we handle OS software updates. there's been a lot of requests for giving a refresh, taking a paintbrush to the kiosk, doing some update there, and adding some additional capabilities there in the kiosk. And as I mentioned before, a lot of requests around reboot behavior in payloads and file sets. So there's a lot of things going on there that we're looking for. And you'll notice there's a link here that says talking about product board. And for our roadmap and just basically giving us feedback on product, that's the place to go. We kind of have two portals there. One is just the roadmap, shows you what we're actually working on, similar to these slides. And the other is stuff we're thinking about way out there. We call it our big ideas board, right? You can submit ideas on your own there. It doesn't have to be the stuff that we've published. Josh, I don't know if you can break over there for just a second, because we'd like to just walk you through that just real quick so you can see what that looks like. So there's
I'm going to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. So in the knowledge base, there's an article here that lists a link to both things. Now, there's a reason for these two things being separate. As I mentioned, the first is the roadmap feedback portal. So if you click on that, Josh, this has a slightly different look and feel now than it did before.
I have to log in. There we go.
Right. So what you'll see here is the things that we're working on. There's tabs across the top for the different releases. So 14.9, we kind of need to take off the board because that just released yesterday. But if you go to 14.10, here's some things that we're working on, right? So if you click, for instance, on reworking reports in the web admin, Josh, what you're going to see is the details about this, like the explanation of what we're doing. And then you have an opportunity here to tell us, well, that's good, or that's great, or that's super important, right? And if you click that, Josh, you're going to see that you then get an opportunity to tell us why that's so important to you. All you need to do then is give an email address and go ahead and submit that. Now, there's a little anti-spam engine that will make you confirm that email. But that's the purpose of this, is to give us feedback on the roadmap. Generally speaking, the roadmap is shorter term than the things that we're looking at in the other portal, right? So you can submit that if you like, right? And then you'll get the confirmation email. So that's all good. If we look at the other portal real quick, I want to point out here that this one's a little bit different, right? So as I mentioned, we call this our big ideas board. And this is broken out into 4 tabs where we're looking at features versus enhancements. Features are what we're considering things that we don't really do today, and or they're really, really big. Enhancements are things that we do today, but we'd like to do better than we did. And we have 2 of those, one that's the top 5 for each. And then we have 2 more tabs here that are 10 more of each category. So 10 more features, 10 more enhancement ideas. You can give us feedback on these. So for instance, that top middle one there is adding a new permission in the product. So making it so that maybe only certain folks can enter values in a custom field, for instance. Right? You can give the same kind of feedback like we showed before, like Josh showed before there. But additionally, if you click out of that, Josh, you'll notice there's a little button in the top right where you can just submit your own idea, right? And that can be anything that you like, right? And don't be frustrated if you submit something and we don't immediately do it. There's no question that we won't immediately do it, but we are looking for a tipping point on those requests. So the more people that give us the feedback, the more likely we are to be working on something and making sure that we're doing what you want. If you don't tell us, we don't know, and if you leave us to our own devices, we'll do it wrong, right? So it behooves you to tell us where you'd like to see us go. So let us know here. We highly recommend you give us feedback through product board. All right, thanks for that, Josh.
Yeah.
Okay, what's next? I can't remember. Oh, good. Josh gets to take over. Good.
Yeah, so the slides that follow, you'll recognize them if you've been on previous Alliance calls. We wanted to kind of recap, we said we'd do things, did we do them? Where are they at? And so the next slides, we'll talk about that. And then there's kind of a slide that talks about what we plan to do moving forward. So this first thing was this issue that was found by Clarity. We let you guys all know as soon as we knew, what what steps to take before it was publicly announced. We kind of did what other companies do. If you look at, some other companies like Cisco, for instance, they're pretty much doing these announcements all the time. So we went through this exercise, and so if it was to happen again, or I should say when it happens again, because all software is, if you're using software, there's going to be a vulnerability found, and we will go through this exercise again. But it's not just, this was a vulnerability in our software. Whenever we have a new release, it's important to think about that our software includes other software. Like everyone knows that we have Apache, for instance, in our software. We have OpenSSL. Those software have their own security announcements. And for anyone that watches those, I'm sure you do, OpenSSL, for instance, had a vulnerability that they released a patch for 17 days ago. They made an announcement on November 1st, and made the patch available. And so FileWave 14.9 includes that, update. So when we release a new version of FileWave, besides thinking about the new features that you're going to get in 14.9, also think about the fact that we're updating that third-party software that's embedded in our product. And so you're in a much more secure state if you're, always on the latest, because then you're always going to get those updates.
And I just chime in there real quick as well, that it's not just related to the security side of things. Also, just from a support perspective, you're going to have a lot better experience running the most recent version of the software, both from a feature and stability perspective, but also, if you call in with an issue, it's much easier for our development teams to help you if you're on a recent version. So we do highly encourage you to try to keep up. And I will say that, we sat down this morning with Tobias, and we have a bunch of objectives for the company. And one of the objectives is to work on increasing quality. We really do treat it seriously. And one of those things is to make sure that we're encouraging you all to be on the latest versions, to try to make our support the best it can be too, on top of the quality pieces. So it's more than just the security aspect. There's a lot of pieces that go into keeping up with the latest versions, and we'd just like to highly encourage you to do so.
Okay, so then next, and again, we announced that we were going to bring back the FileWave community. Once upon a time, there was a forum. We brought it back, as we said, and it's live. It's alliance.filewave.com. It's picking up steam. There's people posting questions, and there's other community members answering those. There's FileWave folks like myself that I look to see, if there's maybe a question that isn't getting an answer, maybe I can add something to it, and we hope this really takes off, because this helps all of you, and anyone can read the forums. To post in the forums, you just have to be listed as a contact with your organization. It doesn't cost anything. And if, for instance, you're not quite sure how to log in, maybe you're not listed as a contact in our backend system and you can't log in, you could reach out to customer experience. So it's customer.experience@filewave.com. And they can, make sure that your name and email are tied to your organization, and you'll be able to log in. And that's also important if you want to use things like the Foundry, because the login at the Foundry is the same one for the Alliance forums. We try and not give you too many passwords to remember.
And I'll just chime in on this one as well. So sorry to step on you there, Josh, but this one is, we had a community before, and I just want to mention that this lives or dies with your participation. That's really what it's for, right? It's not so much a venue for us. We want to help you, right? So anything that's posted, we will certainly answer questions and all that kind of thing. But it's meant to be, it's called FileWave Community for a reason, because it's meant to be community driven. So don't be shy about sharing content. If you say, hey, I've got this great custom field and I'm using this script on my Macs to read blah, then post it, publish it, right? Throw it out there. Don't be afraid. you know, that's how this community will really become a living and breathing thing. So please do participate. Don't say to yourself, oh, I'm not good enough to post something there. Yes, you are. I guarantee it. Go ahead, feel free, and we highly encourage you to participate.
Okay, so on the training front, we really wanted to have an in-person event again. COVID kind of derailed that for a while, and we were able to have this event in Indiana. It was great. I mean, we had a lot of customers. We had a feedback form. We collected a lot of feedback. There was a lot of positive feedback. There was feedback about things that we could do better. So, we took all that. And so when we get to the slide talking about, kind of our future thoughts, that's where I kind of put that all together. But we had that event as planned, and it was a great thing. And we learned a bit from it to make the next event better.
And I'm going to chime in again on that one, Josh. So, and just so, nobody thinks that I'm really stepping on Josh. We talked about this before, but I would probably chime in on a few slides. And I just want to say how much of a thrill this was for us. We were so happy to do this training day, right? So the way these things work is it takes months actually to put together the content and make sure that we've got this lined up and that lined up and who's taking this and that. But the day itself is so much fun. We really love working with customers, and we love to see people using our tool successfully. And it was really a thrill to be in the room with everyone and to kind of work through some things, see some really cool things that our team was presenting, but also hear about the ways you're using FileWave creatively to manage your environment. So it was really fun for all of us, and we really appreciate those who were able to come. And I see somebody's asking about Europe. We really want to do one, but Josh will talk about that here next. So.
Yeah, and I'd like to add, meeting people face to face where possible is great, because then there's a name and the face, and there were some support people there. Some of the sales engineers were there at the event in the US, so it's a good opportunity to connect and find out more in person. Over in Europe, we honestly did try to do an in-person event, and when it came down to it, COVID kind of derailed that. But we had at least the virtual event, because we really wanted to give an event. Again, it was very well attended, very successful, and we are hoping that the state of the world, for next year allows us for an in-person event, for the same reasons that I said that the Indiana event was really good. I think that, an event in Europe would be great in person.
Well, and Tobias, you as the boss, you can certainly control that, right?
Just fix all the problems in the world, and
that's right.
Have an in-person event.
Yeah, I'm going to try really hard. Obviously, my mission statement is broad, but not that broad. But no, I think to add on this, right? We've heard you loud and clear. I actually, I think we're a remote first company, and I think on the agenda for next year is both to also within FileWave meet more in person, because I think that's really missing, and we're humans. We kind of want to see each other every now and then. So I think the same is true for connections with you guys, right? I think we can do a lot of online stuff, and it's super efficient. Like, we can just dial in from anywhere, which is amazing. But then at the same time, I think they're, meeting in person and meeting the people behind the screens, I think goes a long way. So the answer is yes, we'll do everything we can to also do an on-site training day in 2023 in Europe, and we'll definitely repeat the one in the US.
Okay. So the next thing was this FileWave Assist program that I've talked about. This slide comes from a previous one of these meetings. So in North America, on renewals, folks have been seeing this program talked about. And I've talked about it before. It's basically a way to engage with you, the customer, every month, to keep things on track, to be able to do things like help you with a support ticket escalation, to make sure when a new version comes out that you understand what's new in it, why you want to go to it. to make sure your server's healthy, you know, that you remember to do things like renew your Apple push notification cert, for instance. You know, some best practices. You know, could you be tying into other things like incident IQ, you know, through APIs or such? So this program, it exists in renewals, and we're going to be working on making it so that, you know, when new customers come on board, we tell them about it too. I believe we're going to start doing that, and we have to make some materials, right? Because it has to be more than just this slide that we're explaining what the program is. But also we want to do this in Europe and Asia as well, so that, you know, again, it's just an offering. It's not a mandatory service. It's if this would benefit you, then this is a service, and it's structured, and we're trying to build more and more materials to support it. We've only been doing it now for, it feels like longer, but it only started about 2 months ago. So we're early in, but you know, so far, all positive feedback about it. And if you're curious about it and no one's ever mentioned it, you know, you can reach out and ask about this. You can ask customer experience about it, or if you email professional.services@filewave.com, you know, you'll get me and my team, and, you know, we can set up a call to talk about it if you had never seen this before and you are curious about it.
And I'll just chime in there as well, that on the professional services side of things, that term sometimes scares people because they think of this kind of rape and pillage model of professional services. And I assure you that that is not how we run professional services at FileWave. We are very much focused on customer success. That is what our professional services organization is for, is to make you successful, right? So is it free? No, but it looking to make you successful. We're looking to make you the rock star, and Josh and his team are absolutely superb at doing so. So if you have any interest in this, you know, please do reach out and chat with the team.
Thank you. Okay, so moving on, you know, Foundry. I don't know if folks noticed, I didn't really call it out, but when we looked at the product board, that was in Foundry. As well, you know, in Foundry, we posted the web admin webinars that talked about the associations, the deployments migrations. So for instance, if you didn't attend those, or if you needed a refresher of what the associations to deployments migration tool is, you know, you can go into Foundry, and the content's there for the web admin webinar. And as well, there is also, and I think I might have done it on this slide, there is also a TeamViewer course now in there, and it has roughly 2 hours of material, and it will take you through an overview or an introduction of TeamViewer, and then it will go through for each platform, setting it up and actually doing a remote control session. So this was actually made by Sean in my group, and it is excellent. And there is a feedback form at the end of it, so you can tell us if you thought it was excellent or not, or what we could do better, because we do always like feedback. It's really hard to make things without knowing if the things we're building are good or not. So we really do look for your feedback, honestly. And that's why every course in the Foundry has a feedback form at the end of it. And as well, sticking to my commitment to have training certificates, at the end of this course, if you've gone through all the videos, there is a certificate for 2 hours of training, so that you can use for, let's say you have CompTIA's A+ certification, or like me, I have A+ and Linux Plus and Project Plus, and I have ISC Squared CISSP. So I'm always looking for continuing education credits to renew my certifications. So if you're in that boat where you need credits towards learning for certificates, you'll get a 2-hour certificate if you watch all these, and you'll understand how FileWave works better. And even if you don't manage Android, just, you know, the videos are not long separately. So if you spend 10 minutes watching Android, even though you don't manage Android, you'll learn a little bit and you'll get a certificate at the end. And, you know, I know I'm on the knowledge base slide, but just one last thing about the Foundry is, it should be obvious from the things I've been saying, is that we are going to continue to revamp the contents there and improve upon it, and improve upon the FileWave Certified Admin exam to make it very current. And we do audits of the questions. So, you know, as somebody takes the test, if you sign up for the FileWave Certified Admin and you take that exam and you feel that a question was unfair or unclear, we, again, look for feedback, because sometimes if the answer seems obvious to us, that's because we're living in FileWave all the time, right? But you know, you might say to me, this question doesn't make sense for this reason, and then I'll go back and edit it, and, you know, perhaps you'll get credit for it where it said that it was wrong before. Maybe I get rid of the question, but we do want feedback on that. And if you've never heard of the FileWave Certified Admin, it's a paid certification where basically we use the material in the Foundry, plus there are homeworks that you would suddenly see if you had this, if you signed up for the certification. You could do the homeworks. The homeworks get graded. Sean mostly does the grading, so you'll interact with him quite a bit. And you'll take an exam. You have to get an 80% or higher on the exam, and then you get a certification that says that you are, you know, extremely knowledgeable in FileWave, which could be good for your career, perhaps, career development, you know, and, you know, if your boss is interested in training things, you know, this is a training opportunity that you can do and get the FileWave Certified Admin. It also includes 3 hours of one-on-one help. So, you know, besides charging you for the exam, we do have those 3 hours that you can use anytime within the year that you're taking the exam, and we'll teach you beyond what's in Foundry. And that also kind of helps us too, because we see the things that maybe were confusing in the Foundry, helps us improve it. So that's the last bit on the Foundry for now, but the knowledge base, right? So we went through a migration from an on-premise instance of Confluence to a hosted over the summer, and the migration went great. I don't think we hit any major issues with the migration. We also did an article cleanup. There were many articles that were very old because FileWave's been around for a long time. And so our knowledge base, you know, accumulates things that become no longer relevant. And we continue to do a cleaning of the knowledge base. And you'll notice there's new recipes that have been added. There's a lot of new articles. And on the main page of the knowledge base, at the bottom half, you'll actually see recently updated articles. So, you know, that is one thing you can do to see what's changed. But also there's an article, and maybe I'll drop over to the knowledge base for a sec. So over here, there is an article about using RSS to stay updated on the KB. So if you read this article, it will give you simple steps to be able to subscribe and basically know, you know, when things have changed in the knowledge base. I use this myself, although in this browser that I have for this, it's not going to show, of course, I don't think. Let's see if I just have it hidden. No, I don't have it. So one of the solutions in here gives you a little widget for your Chrome browser, so you can just see a little number when there's new things. So this is an article that could help you keep track of the changes in the KB, because there are often edits to the KB. And although it's obscured a little bit by our little stamp, kb@filewave.com, and it's also printed when you go to the KB. It shows up right there on the main page. It'll say kb@filewave.com. You can email us if you see an error, if you see something that's just missing, and that'll actually go to me to get prioritized to get updated. Okay. So, you know, everyone also, many people ask for webinars as well, you know, and the web admin workshops, they made sense this year. You know, a couple of things that, you know, I'm going to talk about in the next slides that didn't make sense was that we did it every other Thursday at the exact same time of day. There were things we learned about from planning it, The actual execution of the webinar was great, and we've stored it in the Foundry so you can watch it. We issued certificates for people that attended. If you attended and you never saw a certificate, you could email me or that professional.services@filewave.com, and I'll look at why that was and take care of it. But we did certificates for that. And we want to continue that in the new year. Obviously not web admin workshops necessarily, but as we think about our plans, for the new year, we were thinking about, continuing to update the content in the Foundry and KB, as I was saying, continuing to support the Alliance Forum, because we really do want to see that be a great thing. And, Tony was mentioning how, we don't treat professional services as this, like, take as much money as we can, maximize profit. We look at, when we're making a program, how to make it the most helpful. We have to cover costs, right? And we do have to make a little bit of money, but we want to make it the most helpful, and so that's why, when we had that, on-site in Indiana, it was all day, but we made it a cost of $500 each, because we figured we could make that, make sense to us financially and still give you a day's worth of content, and, similarly, we want to produce things that don't necessarily cost you money or cost you as little as possible, so that you can be as engaged as possible in the product for, not having to continue to invest so much. So the Foundry is free, right? The knowledge base is free. The Alliance Forum is free. Use it as much as you can. In the Foundry, there's an option to get a FileWave certified admin, right? That's where we can maybe recover some costs and give you some value. Those homeworks are very helpful. The exam does prove your knowledge. So we think about that. We think about the webinars. Those were free. And we believe that the webinars would be free again this summer. We're thinking about topics. What's come up is, at a lot of organizations, the person who set up FileWave is not the person that's still there. The onboarding happened, right? A new customer comes on, you get an onboarding. But then that person got replaced, and now you on this call, you're running FileWave, but you never got an onboarding. So you do have those free options, right? But having a FileWave Basics thing where we could just kind of walk through as a group the stuff in FileWave, we thought that might be helpful to some. That was some of the feedback we got. We have some other ideas for webinars, like going in depth with Grafana, for instance. We did a little thing on Grafana at the HEC conference in Indiana, just, what was that, a week or two ago? Or last week, it was last week. But, send us ideas. The email address is here for professional services. Send us ideas for things that you would love to see in a webinar. And, if we get a bunch of great ideas, maybe they become like, a Summer Friday thing or something. And we also want to make them available at times that make sense for all 4 or 5 time zones in North America, the time zones in EMEA, the time zones in Asia, which means we're going to have them at different times of day, right? And so we really do want to help everybody globally. So that's top of mind to make that work for everybody. And, a spring or fall event, we're thinking about North America and EMEA for that. So the state of the world will control that, as we were saying, but we really would like to do an in-person event. But if we can't, because of whatever thing comes up, we do want to have a virtual event at least to keep that rolling. And that is that.
And Josh, I'm just going to chime in on that one real quick, because John, for instance, was saying that getting funding to come to the event was hard to come by, and that's where we really take the experience we had with these webinars this past summer. I have to be honest, we were a little surprised at how well attended they were. Right, we had a lot of folks at those, so we'd really like to do some more of them. This past time around, we did 5 of them that were the same topic, and you would have thought that the 5th one, nobody would have been there. We had more people, I think, at the 5th one than we had at the first one. So we really do look forward to doing some more of these. And of course, it's a there's a cost component to doing the on-site events, of course, and even when it comes to the full day training events. But the webinars are a little easier for us to handle, a little easier for us to swallow. So we can take one topic and do kind of a focused event on one topic. So we really do look forward to this. So please do send in your ideas and suggestions to the email that Josh has there, because we'd love to build some more of these.
Yeah. And then I guess we're at the part that you know, a lot of people like this part of the meeting the most. You know, your chance to spend the remainder, which is about an hour. You know, up to, I guess, about an hour. We'll see how it goes. Sometimes there's a ton of questions. We got some of these questions before the event, so we paste them here, and we'll kind of talk about them a little bit, and then we'll drop into sort of the normal think about your questions, and you can put them in the chat, and we'll go through them. So I guess on the first one, right, please cover how to properly set up TeamViewer, and also about the web admin. Well, what you've seen from earlier slides is we actually have step-by-step for TeamViewer for every platform. We have that in the Foundry. So I don't necessarily want to tie up, you know, the AMA for that, because the content over there really is great. And what I would say is, go watch the asker of this, or anyone that's curious, go watch the videos in the Foundry on TeamViewer. And then if you had questions, if you go over to the Alliance forums, right, you'll either see a response from me or from another customer that knows the answer. You know, you'll be able to easily interact. I mean, if it's a support question, obviously open a ticket with support, but otherwise you could very quickly get what you need. Web admin is the same. We have the web admin webinar in the Foundry. I'd say the same thing, review that. It was very good and detailed in about 2 hours. And then use the Alliance forums for some follow-up questions. Or if you have professional services, you know, feel free to reach out to the person you're working with. On the zero-touch deployment, I think, Tony, you had some ideas about that when we were chatting about this
you're
earlier.
doing fine. You're doing fine. Just keep going. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, on the zero-touch deployment, it does, of course, depend on what platform we're talking about and what the capabilities are on the platform. I'm guessing maybe you're talking Apple on this front. There are a few things that we're looking at here. Of course, DEP on the Apple side drives, you know, the beginning of that process, at least. We highly recommend a couple of things there to really help. You can look at a phased deployment where you're doing kind of a phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 kind of thing. And API calls actually can come in really handy there. If you're dealing with, say, Windows or Mac, you can use the API to drive phased onboarding, so you can maybe prioritize content of what you want to get to folks first. There's some things you can do there. But it really does kind of depend on what we're looking to do. The use of placeholders is also very useful if you're dealing with actual new gear, that you can set things up ahead of time and just have it match up based on name and kind of pre-deploy content. I'm an honest guy, so I'll tell you where I also feel that we're a little weak. We're a little weak on notification to the user during that process, right? So that's one of the areas in the product that we'd really like to work on. I'll go ahead and answer the next one too. So we had a question about rollout plans, and that may be kind of a little hidden little gem that's in FileWave Anywhere that you may not have noticed. So there, on software updates, there's an ability to define a time for installation. Now, it's not as granular as we'd like it to be, and it was always intended to be applied to anything, not just software updates, but they allow you to say, hey, just after business hours, or hey, this can only be installed on weekends. We'd really like to push that a little bit forward too on the product side. But right now, it's only software updates and not for when you click the button that says, hey, associate it to all devices.
And then, you know, for macOS Ventura, right, are there any changes in updating or creating third-party file sets? Really, I would say that Big Sur, Monterey, and Ventura are very similar, right? The only thing I'd say to think about is that if you have a file set to only go to specific versions of macOS and you don't have the thing checked to say deploy on newer versions, well, then Ventura won't be checked, necessarily. So you'll want to go and look at your file sets that you are limiting to certain versions. And if you know that that file set should work on Ventura, you could change the requirements for the file set. But otherwise, and I guess as related to third party, make sure that software does work on Ventura, because I'll think of like Cocktail for the Mac, right? They always make a new version of Cocktail for every version of Mac OS. So you want to think about, if that's the case, but otherwise it really is the same. There's some new profiles. If you look at our release notes for 14.9, there are some new changes to profiles for Ventura, so you can do those additional things that Apple's given us to be able to add.
And I'll mention on that one as well, Josh, there have been some questions around MDM software updates for taking a device to the newest version of the OS. Major versions of the OS are not supported through that MDM update command, but it's a little gray area. So we're working on that now and talking to Apple and trying to understand that, because it's kind of surprised us that all of a sudden we had major upgrades showing in that list. So just know for now you can't do it, but we're working with Apple to understand why they're showing up in the list. When the responses on that, or if you try, it says, oh, you can't do the major upgrade. So we're looking at that as well.
If I can just chime in there. It looks like this is something which was not available at the very beginning of MDM software update, and which has been added by Apple. We have asked them to clarify the documentation. There is one item which allows to define how the update should be installed. And if you are now using FileWave, you will see that it will just complain that the installation command is not supported by the update. It's a very gray area, as Tony mentioned, but it looks like there will be a way. So we are working on it, and hopefully we will be able to do it in a future version.
And further comment on that, although not directly on this topic, I just want to thank those of you who actually submitted questions ahead of time, because as anybody that's watching the chat can see, having some questions in here really kind of tickles everybody's thinking cap a little bit, and so we get so many questions in the chat. So Josh, we got a whole slew of things queued up for after we go through this list.
Okay, so then let's the stacking of installs on Kiosk, right? Obviously, it makes sense that if you have something in Kiosk, they want to be able to perhaps pick 3 things and say, I want these 3 things to install, right? And one of them needs a reboot. But the way it would be today, you'd click the first thing would do a reboot, then you'd come back to Kiosk and pick the second thing you want, right? And so this was something you and I talked about, Tony, right? And I believe the answer is that there isn't necessarily a way today to do this, but Product Board would be the way to send an idea like this so that it might be considered. Because in UI, it would be possible, if we put some development to it, to create like a, you could multi-select things and then say install all 3 of these things.
Yeah,
right?
It's a funny question, actually, because when you look at the requests that we've gotten that are about current feature sets, things that we do today, there are 2 topics, as I mentioned, that just kind of boil to the top and that we get the most requests for, and it's reboots and it's kiosk. Those are the 2 topics, and this question combines both of them together. So it's a very good one. We partially have, I think, that request. There's a couple of things you can do today. You, of course, can put multiple payloads or file sets together in a payload group or a file set group. So you could publish that way, but that means that you have to know ahead of time what kind of things people want to group together, and you may very well not be able to do that. So that may be helpful or not. But yeah, please do give us feedback in Product Board and that if you've got like, hey, here's my, and what's really helpful, be as verbose as you like. We need this because I want to publish A and B and C, and A requires a reboot, but A needs to be installed. Anything, the more detail you can give us, the better, because it's the user stories, it's the use cases that help us so much in determining how valuable that request might be to other folks as well.
Okay. And then I guess that feeds into kind of the last question on this slide was, that there are MDM controls not present in FileWave. Will this be expanded upon? And the answer we talked about and with PN and was, that basically we add the obvious things, right? The things that are obvious to us, right? They just get added. You'll see in 14.9, there are some additional profiles, right? That we know there's new things that come out. And some of them we say, aha, this is a perfect fit for FileWave, we add it. There are others that may just take us more time, right? But we still know they're important. And so you'll see them show up in 14.10 or 14.11. And then there's others where we're not quite sure that it's worthwhile, but the feedback through product board could clue us into, maybe we're wrong. And the thing really is helpful to people because you gave us your perspective about why that thing was really important.
Well, I mean, full disclosure on this one, Josh and I discussed this yesterday, and it was number 1 on the list. And we said, hey, let's put this at number 6 on the list because we know that PN has another appointment and he might not be there early enough. So we put this one last so that PN could be here when we answered this question. But I know that some things like lights out management for Mac Minis, for instance, we purposely didn't do because our product does it. So we said, you know what, that one's really not terribly important to us. At least that was our interpretation, as Josh said. But please do, if you say, hey, I know you guys could do this, but you're not doing it, please let us know through product board. And PN, if you want to chime in there with anything, feel free.
I mean, definitely, when Apple is sharing all the new features, usually in June, WWDC, we have very short nights, especially here in Europe, because time zone difference and watching all the stuff from California. And yeah, we build a list of everything, and you know that Apple is quite good at disclosing items, not the first day, but it took weeks, if not months, to have updates in documentation. So we have to choose, we have to focus, and we focus on what we think is the most important. And again, I can only repeat what Josh said. We need your feedback to prioritize. We have our ideas, we have our roadmap, but we are not building the product for us. We are building the product for you. And if we can exchange and share the fact that, our view is maybe not the ones you have, and we can adapt to match your better, then it's better for us and it's better for you.
Perfect. So I guess at this point, usually I, stop sharing the presentation. I show my screen and then we'll go through the chat. We'll look for questions, and this is the more interactive part of the session.
Yeah, so let me start with a question from Greg because he got in there first. So he mentioned that in the KB article on Mac OS upgrades or erasing it, it mentions the API key and you copy a token, a base64 token from the administrator's token. The where you get that token is in the manage administrators assistant within the product. So if you go into assistants and manage administrators and look at any particular account, you'll see that there's a tab, a tab there for application tokens. That's the base64 there that we're talking about. Highly recommend, depending on what you're doing for this, that you create a user that's specific for a utilization. Right. So if it's if let's say that I was doing an integration with a ticketing system, for instance, and I wanted to use an API call to send data over to that external ticketing system. So we have a list of all the devices that are in FileWave, for instance. I'd most likely create an account like like Right Now. Right, I might create an account for Right Now, and then that way, that account has its own token. So if that's revoked or anything like that, it wouldn't impact anything other than that particular application.
Yeah, the thing that you can do even at 2 different levels. So you can create a specific account which will have only the permissions to do a limited set of changes on your system. And then the other granularity you have is you can create multiple tokens. So if you have one script that you deploy somewhere and another script you deploy somewhere else, you can create 2 different tokens. And if you know that for any reason that the script you deployed has been shared while it should not have been shared and could be used by someone you don't know, you can just revoke that specific token, which is invalidate that specific script and not another script. So you really have the complete granularity and all the options you want to manage that. That if you use the token, it's exactly as if someone would log in at FileWave with user password. So it's really impersonating the admin.
Or if you show your token on a YouTube video, as I'm doing today, obviously this token will be revoked right after this.
Poor Bob.
Yeah.
The follow-up question in that from Greg, or at least the second part of the question, has to do with the Monterey upgrade itself. He's asking if that can be published to the kiosk so that folks could self-service on that rather than it being driven via a custom field.
And I believe that could, using the method that Sean has in the KB, I believe.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything that requires that it use a custom field to drive it. Of course, the payload itself is going to be sizable, right? So when the person clicks on install, it's going to, of course, download, right? So that's a part of that process. But and a reboot would be in there as well. But I don't know that there's any reason that you couldn't do it driven through the kiosk as well. It likely means, of course, that you're going to make some changes to the payloads of the file sets.
Yeah, you may want to look at these KB articles for the method that Sean has been maintaining.
There's nothing to stop you deploying the installer first and not being part of the kiosk installer. So you could do it as a two-stage process. And so you could actually have like a smart group, for example, based on is the installer on the machine yet? And then when you know it is, then it can appear in kiosk. And then when the user activates it, all they're doing is activating the script rather than actually trying to then do the download and then waiting.
Well, that's a good point, Sean, and actually goes back to kind of some of the things that Tobias said at the start of his presentation. And the thing that I love most about FileWave is the incredible amount of flexibility in the product. We can pretty much do anything. You just have to think about how you might want to do it.
Okay. Is there another good question? I wasn't seeing the chat for the most of the...
Well, there is a good question, right? And I'll put you on the spot. Are there any plans to support other Linux platforms like Ubuntu?
Well, I don't know the answer for that. So,
well, I will tell you. I will tell you full
the answer.
Yeah, well, I will tell you that the full disclosure is we're right now we're not looking to add additional platforms, but we are looking internally to see what we're going to do that's away from CentOS, because obviously it's short-lived at this point. We've been looking very strongly at Alma Linux, and we kind of have an internal initiative and a team that's working on what we can do there. So that's most likely the direction we're going to go, but it's not written in stone yet.
See, I was looking at that question more like Linux clients
side.
in the field, like IoT devices and such. But I wasn't thinking about
Linux desktop.
Yeah, that may be the question, and if that's the question, then to be honest, no, that's not really something that we've had any kind of real push for.
But product board might be a good place for us to learn. You know, if somebody came to us and said, you know, oh, I have this environment with 10,000 Linux devices. Well, certainly 10,000 Linux devices need to be managed. So that's correct. I guess come to us and tell us.
So maybe one little secret there. I mean, nobody is listening to us and this video will not be posted on YouTube, but we already have a Linux client and some of you are already using it because that's shipped with our imaging solution. So the way we are currently using, we are currently having IVSs getting images from the server is just by using FileWave, because FileWave is great as getting files everywhere. So now the problem is that it's very limited to our imaging solution, and it's obviously not tested on anything else than our CentOS, and we know that unfortunately lots of flavors of Linux may behave differently, so we have to figure out which ones we could support if there is a need. And on the other hand, there is nothing to manage installing RPMs like you could install MSI or PKG. So there is something running, but it's very, very far from being a product that we can give you guys to manage Linux devices. But there is something.
Okay. And then
What else do we have? There were some discussions about the identifier, about the devices and conflicts.
Oh, and serial numbers.
Serial numbers.
Right.
The point is that if we look at it from an Apple perspective, it's already hardware based because we just take the serial number from the device and we just do a checksum on it. So it has a specific format, but we are using serial number. So here it's really hardware based. On Windows, it's a little bit more complicated. There is no strict API to provide a reliable, consistent hardware ID. There is one, but it's not enforced on Microsoft side. And we had several customers who have, if you look at what we report, it just reports to be filled by OEM. That's the exact quote, which is sent by all devices as a serial number. So unfortunately, we cannot rely on that. So that's why we still have this computed based on hardware version for the ID, which is based on MAC address, on serial number reported and so on. But yeah, it needs to be a combination of multiple ones. And we know that sometimes it's not enough to be completely unique. That said, we still use the name as an identifier in combination with this unique number for backward compatibility reason. That's something that was there in FileWave probably before, way before I joined, so more than 15 years ago, and which was quite nice. But yeah, that's something, if you want to change it, we will have to break compatibility. So we have already discussed a lot about how to do that. And we are still trying to find the best way to both to migrate both to something which is way more reliable than just the name, but which will not break completely the compatibility with the previous version of FileWave. So that's the blocking point for us right now. But we'll go there.
And I think I know the answer to this. I feel like I should, but I know PM that you know for sure. But what's the current method in 14.8 to update a DEP enrolled Apple TV device, with tvOS? Isn't it the same as iPads where you can move them ahead with software update, or am I wrong on this?
I would expect that, yeah, it's the same. So there should be an OS update which would show up in FileWave. So either because the app is reporting that it requests the update, or with the kind of online offline catalog, GDMF from Apple. I know that we've worked on different issues related to software update and tvOS in 14.9. I don't have the list of the exact list of bug fixes we made for 14.9 with software update, but I remember that one of my developers worked with this. So that's very likely the answer could be just upgrade to 14.9. But yeah, if that doesn't work.
I guess, John, you know how to reach us in PS. So professional.services@filewave.com, or I think you know my email. So, let me know if that for some reason is behaving the way that we say.
I've seen also some questions about some lag when, or sometimes some issues when renaming or changing the comment of some iOS devices. So we had, I think, 1 or 2 customer cases I've been working with. So there was one issue which we identified on our side on 14.8.0, where at some point we would have some issues to contact Apple APN system. There is a patch which is available. So if you still see the issue, I would expect either move to 14.9 or get the most recent patch. Support can help you there. And on the other side, we've identified together with Apple an issue which is unfortunately fixed only on the most recent version of iPadOS and iOS, which at some point the device will stop communicating with its MDM until you restart the device. And for this one, unfortunately, the only answer we have from Apple is that, yeah, we have to upgrade the device. So that's part of the issues which are slightly hard to investigate, because sometimes it could be a FileWave issue, even if we try to kill as many issues as we can and to to provide as robust as possible FileWave version. And sometimes it's on Apple side, and for these ones we have unfortunately no way to act except reporting the issue and working together with you and Apple to get it fixed as soon as possible.
And just to reveal a little bit about, how the sausage gets made as well, that communication is always a triangle with the Apple MDM framework. We're talking to Apple, Apple talks to device, device talks to us. So we do a lot to build reporting in, to do logging on all these different services and stuff. And when we run into a new issue, that's some issue that we haven't had develop a method first. Capture that additional thing that maybe we weren't logging before. So there's a whole lot that goes into, trying to trap these things, and especially that it's a three-legged stool instead of just being direct communication like it is with the FileWave client. It does make it quite a bit more difficult.
Possibly another thing to mention here on this topic, which won't be necessary for maybe the person who originally mentioned this, because possibly not the issue in this case, but it is something that has come up. When we say it's a triangle, so it's from us to Apple, Apple to device, device to us, actually the device pulls that from Apple. And so there's a persistent connection between the device and Apple to actually basically it talks to Apple saying, have you got anything in my queue for me? The problem with that is that as the battery power goes down on your device, that persistence drops, and you could end up waiting quite some time before the device actually bothers to check in with Apple. They lower it because your battery's going down. They don't want to burn through your battery, so they don't want you to have bad experience. And so you then get this additional delay that occurs, which could be like 20 or 30 minutes maybe if the battery's really getting low, before the device actually picks up the APNS and then reacts upon it. Right. So again, it's a window that changes based on Apple's coding. And of course, we have no control over that either.
And, John's mentioning of, if iOS 16 fixes communications issues, right, maybe he can't go to that because of state testing, that they have to stay on a particular version. But I think we end up stuck a bit because Apple's response to us, even when we engage with Apple about an issue, is sometimes, well, it has to go to iOS 16. So that becomes our answer to the customer in a support ticket, right? Because Apple has let us know that iOS 16 is the way to go on fixing something.
So what I would suggest there is, first we need to make sure that it's not the issue we have identified with FileWave, and which, if the server is fixed, then that means that it's unfortunately the issue on the Apple device. And if it's an issue on Apple itself, then the usual way we have to do is that you, as an Apple customer, you have to open a ticket on their side. We, as an MDM, we open a ticket on our side. We link both tickets. They say that they need to have as much report as possible. And this will change eventually their way of fixing the issues. But the only thing we can do, unfortunately, is to report that we have mutual customers having the issue. But we can definitely help providing logs, helping you gathering logs. That's what we do when talking directly with Apple engineers.
I'm looking through for anything that we may not have. And if someone feels we missed anything, feel free to write it again, because
yeah, we're petering out a little bit there.
Just mentioned that Hi,
Nicholas. I see your message.
Yes. Oh, sorry.
Hey. That's okay.
Yeah, for a long time I have asked FileWave and Apps Anywhere to implement the kiosk mode of Apps Anywhere to FileWave. It's in the normal circumstances that it's in the moment implemented with Jamf, and they implemented it that way that you have a web kiosk for software, which is managing the applications on the local client. So if there's a managed client, Jamf will be called to install the software, which is wanted by the user. Would be a nice idea for university, etc., to have bring your own devices and applications combined with clients which are university owned, and bring your own device owned.
No, so I copied your message so that I could take a look at that, because I haven't looked at apps anywhere. But this fits into kind of that idea of, you know, putting in product board, you know, like, hey, this would be really great for this reason, and then that gets funneled to the right places. But I copied it so we have it too.
Yeah, okay. I've just often asked the question, but just to be.
And also I'll say, sometimes if you have a support case and you might mention to support, like, I'd really like this thing to be this way. It would be good to still think about submitting through product board, because that is sort of a different system that is specifically for voting on things and promoting ideas. And so it would be the most optimal place to put it.
Okay, all right. Thanks.
Yeah. Let's see.
There is a question about ability to sign Apple profiles on the roadmap. I know that there is already a ticket for it, and if it's not visible in the roadmap, I'm sure that Tony will make sure that it shows there. The only question I had, because we discussed about it and how to put it in the priority, the one important information would be what would be your need exactly. Because if we deploy a profile with FileWave or any other MDM, the device is automatically accepting the profile because it's trusted by the MDM. So is it to export a signed profile so you can share the profile somewhere else? It's importing a signed profile and being able to remove the signature to modify the profile. So signing profile, it's easy, but it doesn't bring that much except the nice check mark. I know that in these days of Twitter and having the nice check marks, it's trendy these days, but that doesn't bring that much on the device itself, but it brings a lot on other things. So I see that you answered exporting and importing. So providing more use cases will bring some more material to the feature itself, and that's something that can raise the priority of a feature, definitely.
And so then, obviously product board, if you don't see it there, submit it there, and vote on it there. Let's see. I saw a lot of good ideas for names, and for ideas for training to go to Disney. Okay, here we are. For TeamViewer for macOS, what are my options, if any, to deploy TeamViewer with and without standard user screen recording allowance in your recipes? The current TCC profiles can't be uploaded to the server at the same time.
Yeah, that's correct. It's okay. Because so the script itself has been written to identify if the profile is installed first, and if it is, then it will then activate the software. We want to make sure that the profile is installed before the software, because the thing with TCC is that if the process of the software is already running when the profile lands, then the profile doesn't actually impact it until the software process is restarted. So we're making sure that the profile lands first, and using a requirement script to look for that profile and say, if it's there, then fine, install the software. Now, obviously, we've tried to provide two different profiles to do the same thing based on the idea that you might want to do one or you might want to do the other. So therefore, both profiles have got the same identifier. And as you've noticed, if you try and put both on one server, they're going to complain because you can't have two with the same identifier. If you were to look at one and look at the other, you'll see there's almost no different. So you could just build one yourself, right? Which is just a copy of what we've done. So if you put one in, delete it, put the other in, and just compare the difference, right? Or you could export them as files, as mobile config files, and have a look inside them, or open them up with something else. If you have a look inside, you'll see what's in there, and you'll see there's very, very little difference. So you could just add that difference to your own profile, and then what you'd need to do is duplicate the file set that's actually doing the installer team viewer, and in there you're just going to need to change the line that's looking for the profile identifier, and basically change that to match the identifier of that new profile that you've just made. So you could just keep duplicating it and making others if you wanted. It's just we needed to identify the profile ID within the requirement script. And so therefore, both of them have got the same identifier because we don't know which of these two you would use. But you can just do it yourself. It's fine. Just edit the script, copy and paste. If you go in and edit the profile, the first page you'll hit with actually has the identifier of the profile, and you can highlight that text there, copy and paste it into your script.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Sean.
There was a question about disallowing screen recording. Unfortunately, the TCC profile only allows you to disable it. And since I think it was introduced with macOS 11, it only allows you to let a normal non-admin user to enable it. So that's something we cannot, it's not part of the MDM protocol. So there is no way to force screen recording. It's still Apple's way of managing privacy, and that's a user decision.
And that's why Sean ended up with this second profile, which allows a standard user, because that was sort of the best we could do with granting it, given Apple's restrictions.
But there are some things I'll mention on the, on the product enhancement side that could help with this type of thing. So we've had some requests for being able to use dependencies with profiles, etc. We're kind of working around that. We have some methods for working around that, but if that's the kind of thing that you'd like to see, please let us know. Some of the other things that we've kind of been kicking about is the ability to, not that it's directly related, but it's also about profiles, is the ability to duplicate a profile. We know a lot of you like to be able to do that when you have a restriction profile that's kind of, you have a lot of work to build a copy of it if you have to build it from scratch. So it might be nice to be able to duplicate one. There's all sorts of little things like that, the more feedback we get from you, the better. Pian is just sitting there, not doing a thing. He's waiting for folks to tell him what to do. So the more detail you can give us on these things, the better.
And when we discuss about this with Apple and the fact that we have several customers asking for being able to enable or to force screen recording, their answer is that they don't want to force that for a privacy reason, and their suggestion is to go with social way of handling that. For instance, okay, if you don't have screen recording enabled, then you don't get the software you are supposed to have, which may be a way to do it. Maybe not, because some students will be super happy to not have their testing or assessment software installed. But yeah, that's the way they answered.
Okay. Any questions that we may have missed, feel free to paste them in and we'll hit them now. Otherwise, we might be winding down.
I think there was a question about Catalina support. If we are, because 49 is starting with starting to drop Catalina support. The thing that Catalina is not supported anymore on Apple side, so for us it's super hard to support our software on an operating system which is not supported by the vendor at all. We haven't done anything to prevent a 49 client running on Catalina, but we haven't tested it at all. So we don't know if that works. It should work, but yeah, if that doesn't work, then there is very little chance that we can fix anything, because yeah, neither us have tested it or Apple is still maintaining Catalina. So I would say your call, but yeah, you will not be able to open a support case if anything is not working there.
Just in general, I guess I'll chime in there, because sometimes there are questions about what it means when we put things on our release notes and say, you know, this is a supported version. And when it comes to the OSs, we do kind of an N-1 for our own product. So whatever the current version is, plus the previous version. And we're really doing the same thing on the support version for client OSs. Now, when we say supported, what we mean is we're actively testing against that. So our QA team, when they're doing regression testing in our PI, program increment process, they're testing actively against these particular versions. So as Josh is showing there, say we're saying, say, Mac OS 12 and 13, et cetera, those are what we're testing against actively. And then there's kind of the other end of the spectrum, which is legacy stuff, which we know for sure that we're not supporting. We know there's things that are broken. So you can, for instance, if you're managing Windows 7, we know that we're not going to support anything. Well, support is even a funny word, but you can run a legacy version of our client on it, and it should still report inventory into the system and ostensibly install faucets, but there's no real support for it. But you can't go beyond this version. But then there's a middle ground that is between these two things. So say an older version of Windows 10 that's not specifically on our list to support it doesn't mean it won't work, but it does mean that we don't actively test against it. Right. So there's kind of a middle ground of older OSs that that aren't technically old. If you want to put air quotes around them, they're not that old. It's just that we're not actively testing against them, but we still believe that they'll work. So it depends on the type of issue that comes up, but it's pretty rare that we have an issue with one of our clients that worked before, but then stop working on a version that was, it's unusual for that to happen. If it does happen, we'll treat it on a case-by-case basis, but it's exceptionally rare.
And there was a question, but I think maybe, Vanessa, maybe you mean that we can't push Windows images with hosted servers because you wrote on-prem. Because we specifically, so today, if you have an on-premise server, and you'd have an IVS server, you'd be able to do Windows images. If you're a hosted customer where we run your FileWave server for you, that's the situation where you can't really do Windows imaging. But earlier, Tony was mentioning where that was one of the things that we're looking to get going, right? Where there's been work on that front.
I see Marjorie asked a question there too about permissions. It's one of my favorite topics because it's, Fian's laughing because I have a cow every time we talk about permissions because I'm like, it's wrong, it's wrong, it's wrong. You can set permissions, Marjorie, on folders to prevent folks from being able to do that. So if we look at that idea of a field tech persona where, say, James works in one particular school or one particular office and you don't want James to be able to work with anything else, you can go through and set permissions. Where I say it's wrong is because it's kind of backwards. So we've got this whole story where we're looking at more role-based permissions. But if you show on that family group there the permissions, you'll see that you can set for any user permissions so that they can do stuff or not do stuff. So you can set it to read, write, edit, those types of things. So you could do things like make it so that somebody can't touch it because they won't even be able to see it if you wanted to, or if you want to make it read only, then they couldn't move it, for instance. The only real issue with that, those permissions work fine in the scenario that we're just looking at it. The only issue is that by default, anything new that you add, that user will have all permissions for that, and you have to restrict it. So instead of it defaulting to no permissions and then you give permissions, it defaults to all permissions, and then you have to restrict them. So it depends on the way in which you're doing them, but yeah, you can actually do it. It's just a little bit of work. This is definitely something that we'd like to improve upon, though.
Okay. And deployment reports?
Yeah, Daniel asked a question about deployment reports. So I guess it depends on what you mean by that. So we've got one of the topics that we've been kicking around for a while is that we don't really have a concept of a deployment status itself. So when you look at a deployment, right, you can have multiple payloads that are in a deployment. Our status on those are the statuses on the payloads. So when you look at a device, for instance, that's in a deployment, and you look, you're not going to see a tab that shows deployments. It's going to show, do you have anything that's got something actually signed?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. When you look at it here from either on the device info view, right, it's showing you a status and it actually says deployment, but that deployment is referring to the payloads that are assigned, not to deployments as an overarching thing. So when we talk about this one, we start getting into some semantics here about what is the status of a deployment. If I've got 15 apps in the deployment, what does it mean, right? So there's several things there that we're trying to figure out the best way of reporting. But for now, we've settled on it being at the payload level, because then you've got the granular detail that shows you, okay, exactly which things have worked and which things haven't.
And then I guess from the payload level, I guess folks would hope that you would be able to go here. Well, let me pick that
you have to find one that's assigned, but from a payload perspective, when you look at it, you see all the devices that have it assigned, right? So you see the two sides of it, right?
So this one does have one, and it's in a warning state.
Correct.
I know why.
So usually, and it depends on the use case, right? If you're the central admin that's managing everything, you're probably much more interested in the payload view because it shows you overall status, right? And if you're the field tech kind of persona, if you're working in the field, you're most likely troubleshooting an individual device. So you're much more likely to go to the devices view, right? And see what that status is. And all of these, I'll mention, as I say this all the time and it annoys people, the information that we're looking at here is always based on the last inventory from the device, right? And that inventory schedule depends on the type of device that we're talking about. So if it's a Windows device, for instance, right, that device will be reporting in once every 24 hours or on every, basically on every verify. So that on that schedule, it's reporting information in, and whatever we're looking at inventory wise, it's based on that schedule. iPads are different depending on when we've run the command. So when you assign something new, you're going to get the list kind of updated fairly soon, but it also updates on a 24-hour basis, kind of in an automatic way too. So you just keep in mind that when you're looking, it doesn't mean that it just happened 5 seconds ago. It could potentially be done and not be reflecting it. But as a general overview, it's a really good view.
Some of the inventory scanners, that's how we name them, are not waiting for 24 hours to send. So for instance, if you hit model update, the scanner which reports the current model of the client will report the update as soon as possible. We have the same, for instance, for network scanner. So if you have a device which jumps from Ethernet to Wi-Fi, then we will report as soon as possible. So we try to not report exactly very quickly, because that means that if you have 10 or 20,000 devices reporting a change of your Wi-Fi within 5 minutes, then it will just kill your server. So we have a little bit of delay, but it's not always 24 hours. It really depends on what type of information.
Okay. The question about Microsoft conditional access and supporting compliance status. I don't have an answer on that, unless Tony, you do. I mean, except for product board, obviously. But that.
Yeah, that's one of the things that's posted on our big board, because we do have this question come up from time to time. we'd like to do it. We've been waiting for some kind of tipping point on that one where a lot of folks want to do it. These things, the integration points like this are expensive for us. So we try to look for the things that make the most difference to the most folks. And this one comes up, but it is a long road to do that particular request. So if you've not put in, like if you're out there and you're also saying to yourself, what is FileWave support of conditional access for Microsoft or for the other platforms that have the same kind of concept, please put your feedback into product board on that, because the more folks that we know that you're interested in it, the much more likely it is that we'll do it.
Okay. Well, then I think, I don't think we missed anything. And we're just about 10 minutes away from the end.
All right, super.
Okay. So last chance, if you had a thought that came to mind, post it in the chat. If 10 minutes from now we're not on this session anymore and something pops in your head, think about if it's a support case or the Alliance forums, for instance, like is a great place to ask that thing, or if it's submitting something to product board, because those are all possibilities for something you might think of 10 minutes from now.
And as our Scrum Masters would say internally, 3, 2, 1, okay.
So I will bring up this slide again for a second. And then we'll wrap up. And I don't know if Tobias, if you had anything or anybody else had any closing thoughts.
No, I hope this was useful to you, our customers. Again, thanks for making the time. It's always a great time for me and I think for the team to basically exchange with you live and also show you what's going on and what our plans are. So look forward to the next one. I want to wish everyone in the US happy Thanksgiving next week. Have a great break, and then have a great rest of the year. And then I'm looking forward to meet you all again in Q1.
All right, thanks so much for joining, everybody. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.